Guys, you might have seen a report that just came out from Urban Nation and CIBC talking about how new construction completions, that 50% or over half of the people out there are cash flow negative. So it doesn't make sense to invest in real estate anymore. Stay tuned. Look, I get it. The Toronto real estate market is confusing. Whether you're a new or experienced investor or just looking for a home to raise your family in, join us at Broadview Table Talks as we sit around the table with my friends and talk about the real estate and the ever-changing market in Toronto. That's what we're talking about.
Perfect.
People are cash flow negative like the landlords are?
Landlords are cash flow negative. And the reason why that's happening is because, first of all, the carrying costs are higher, purchase prices are higher because everything just costs more. And the rental rates, yes, they're going up, but they're not enough to cover the cost of construction, right? Of the purchase itself. Now, if 50%, half the investors out there are cash flow negative, why would there be more investors? And that's causing a problem for the tenant population because less supply means it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we have 1 million people coming to the country every year, right? A third of them come to, I think it's GTA or Ontario, a third of them come here. And yes, we have a net loss of, it was 100,000 people they said here, right? Based on 78% of people moved within Ontario to cheaper areas, and another 20%, 21,000 or so left Ontario altogether. So we're still net positive in migration. Where are these people going to live?
Yeah, where did they go?
Right?
The math is not mathing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I find that more people are shacking up together and getting roommates, and it's becoming more of a roommate population. So they said that 3 bedrooms are can be cash flow positive, right? Because if you have a roommate, whether you pay like $100 more versus like, say 2 people are paying $1,600 versus $1,500, right? That's $3,200 you would get on the property. But for asking some individual to pay for, from $3,000 to $3,200, it's a big jump, right? So it's already a big jump as it is. So generally it's gonna be cheaper to obviously share a place, right? Share the common area, share the kitchen, share the bathrooms, things like that. Just makes it more affordable that way. That's the only way it's gonna happen. But that's gonna run out eventually, right? They're saying that smaller bachelor units, more than just over 50% are cash flow positive, just because it's still a lower price point for tenants, but it's going to get worse and worse. And you know why developers don't build anymore?
No, I was wondering that.
You're wondering why? What?
Well, why they're not building, like why there's such a low supply of inventory.
You know why? Because there's no purchasers. If there's no purchasers, developers don't build. So if there's no purchasers, there's no investors. If there's no investors, then the developers won't build them, because they don't take the risk on themselves. They need the deposits of purchasers, first of all, to prove to the banks it's a viable purchase, the viable building, right? And that there's a demand for it and there's appetite for it. And they're not going to put all the capital themselves because, first of all, it's a lot of money. Many, majority of developers don't have that kind of capital. Only the handful of large ones have that money. They won't put it all into that one building because it's very expensive, like several $100 million to build a condo building. And they're not gonna risk themselves by putting everything into one building. And that's why there's less and less purpose-built rentals. Purpose-built rentals meaning that it's purposely built for rental, for the entire building's rental, and no one actually owns it except for one developer or one group of people or a fund or something. And only so many of those people can actually afford to build purpose-built rentals. It's only like institutional funds, like RSP money or pension funds, things like that, right? So they're not going to build it because, first of all, they're going to use leverage too. And the banks, because there's only one owner for it, they're going to lend you less money. So typically you have to put down 35% if it's just one owner. But if it's a collection of condo investors, all you'd have to put down is 20%. The investors put down 20% collectively, and they'll lend you 80%. They'll lend you more money, basically. Mm-hmm. And I generally find if it's one owner owning the entire building, why would they go super high end on everything, right? They would just kind of do basic investments into basic appliances, just like to try to save money where they can. Because at the end of the day, it's a for-profit business, and everything in Ontario, everything in this world is for-profit in North America anyway. For those of you watching that think that, why don't they just build it? Well, who's they and why would they build it? There's no incentive to build without profit in our capitalist society, unfortunately. So that's why there's not enough. Does that answer your question? Why there's not enough supply?
It makes sense, yeah, from the developer's perspective. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, it's not even that it's not worth it, because it is worth it. Like the profits, developer profits generally around 10 to 15% after everything, right? There's an article saying that the government profits more from taxes than the developers do on the actual development. But the developers are the ones taking all the risk. Sure, there's a lot of stuff that the government has to pay for, such as infrastructure costs, sewers, schooling, electricity requirements, water requirements, things like that. But ultimately, they're not the ones taking on the risk. It's the developer taking it on. And yet they only get paid 10 to 15%. Because it's such a large project, it's still several $1 million. It's just that it's so much risk. So as much as it's sexy to be a developer, it's so scary. You could lose your shirt easily. That's why.
And then how do we combat that if nobody's if there's no incentive? Yeah, but nobody's purchasing.
That's a very valid question.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of solutions out there that are proposed. The easiest one to think is that the government should build housing. I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
But why would the government build housing when they're terrible at just running everything? Everything's so inefficient. No, seriously, it's not a joke to them. It's just that that's not what they specialize in. Right? Yes, you can contract to third-party developers, like other developers, and they can pay them, which is actually happening. That happens a lot. But I just find the incentive is not there. I think it just goes back to the root of capitalism. Like, everybody's greedy by nature. That's what capitalism is. You do what's best for you and your family, and in turn, you provide a competitive advantage, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it too expensive and you're not delivering a valuable enough product, another competitor will come there and knock you out. Mm-hmm. But they're doing it for the same reasons, selfish reasons. Mm-hmm. Right? Whereas the developer, the city or the government structures, they're doing it for the people, but then how good would they be at that? It's very inefficient. They're not so good at it. That's one way. Another way to get more supply is to this whole EHON thing, which Toronto's doing. It's expanding housing Ontario neighborhoods or something like that. Okay. Right? So basically intensifying land, making getting rid of single family zoning. So you know how in each of the neighborhoods that you're in, like East York, for example, you're only allowed a single house. You can't build a big condo building in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Why don't you want that? Because the infrastructure can't handle it, right? There's not enough, like I said, schools, plumbing, sewers, electricity grids, roads even. Like, it's just going to be, imagine dropping 500 people in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. You're going to complain. And not even just one, that's just one tower. Imagine like 5 towers. Right, all the neighbors are going to complain about shadows and there's a whole bunch of stuff, traffic. Yeah. So that's why it can't happen. That's why zoning is meant for only one house in that individual lot. And I think over 70% of Ontario or something like that, or GTA, I think, some large percentage is called the yellow belt. Yellow meaning yellow zoning, single family zoning, and they're only allowing single family zoning on those lands. Well, that's changed now as of I think it was April or May that it just passed. Now you can have up to 4 units as of right, if you're not changing the structure or intensifying the size of the property itself. If in a bungalow you can squeeze in 4 units, that still meets building code and fire code, go for it. You don't need to change any zoning. You can do it with building permits, which is pretty quick. Yeah. Then on top of that, you're allowed a garden suite if your lot allows for it too, right? And it meets those requirements. So potentially on every single house out there, potentially you can have up to 5 units, 4 plus 1 units. Whether it makes sense economically or not, that's a different story because it's not cheap to build. Like if you're looking at $280, $350 a square foot, it's really hard to recoup that cost if you're only getting $3 to $4 per square foot per month for rent.
Yeah, because if we were complaining earlier about like developers not having the money to fund these, how is the mom and pop landlord gonna fund that?
Yeah, well, the mom and pop landlords would rely on the investors, developers to build. Yeah. But if they're not buying because everything's cash flow negative, mm-hmm. then there's gonna be less supply. That's gonna be a problem. So if you're an investor out there and you're thinking of ways to take advantage of the situation, well, you have to basically buy at a lower price point, which means you're gonna have to buy a smaller unit, which is like a single bachelor or studio in today's market in Toronto, or you're gonna have to go outside of the GTA where there may or may not be the renter population, mm-hmm. the quality of renters as well too. The jobs aren't out there either. Or potentially you can group together and buy a larger unit where you can have a bunch of people having the option of being roommates. You can have 2 bedrooms, 2 plus 10s, 3 bedrooms, right? The 1 and 1 plus 10, I think right now are the most vulnerable because I think those are the ones that if you have a single occupant in there, they have to make way more than the average income to be able to afford to live there, mm-hmm. right? So if you're an investor, potentially look at buying a 2 or 3 unit house or apartment or condo or house if you can afford to.
This is just a little bit more insider for you, I guess, mm-hmm. because you see so much pre-construction projects. But would they be open to maybe even doing like more 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units? Because I know the allocation has always, half of it is 1 bedrooms and then quarter of it is studios and then the other quarter is allocated for 2-bedroom, 3-bedrooms.
Yeah,
So-
I think depending on which neighborhood, I think some councils mandated a certain number of requirements of certain sizes. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm not sure. But ultimately, in terms of what's acceptable in the marketplace, you're either building a building that's geared towards investors completely or end users. It's hard to do both really well, because ultimately we're constrained by the amount of units, or amount of square footage you can get on a particular piece of land. Right? So that then eventually just becomes price per square foot.
I see.
So is price per square foot, and the average for new construction, you can't get away for anything less than $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a square foot, $1,600, close to $2,000 a square foot. By the time, in a couple of years, I'm sure it'll be $2,000 a square foot. You look at Manhattan, $2,000 a square foot, it's like kind of normal, right? And Hong Kong's even worse, like $4,000 a square foot. So it becomes cost per square foot. So yes, you can have 2 or 3 bedrooms, but how many people can actually afford that end price of $1.5, $2 million, right? So yes, it'd be good to do that. It'd just be harder. What I'm seeing in the new construction world is more incentives now. So you're getting longer deposit structures, 5% per year until the project's being built. That's in 5 years or so. I'm seeing perhaps even developer offering like vendor takebacks, or like kind of like mortgages for you. So guaranteed mortgages, whereas the banks won't let you qualify. They'll give you financing for the next 2 years, and then you have to take out that financing with regular financing as the property appreciates, right? So that's boosting up the new construction market right now. But aside from that, if the new construction market, if there aren't buyers for it, then there's going to be no supply, and just everything's going to get worse here. It truly is going to become like Gotham City, because people can't afford to live here, and there's going to be a lot more crime and stuff like that, right? Yeah. But on a positive note, I think Toronto is a great place to live, and I like dense cities. I like going to Tokyo and Hong Kong and LA. You just came back from San Fran as well too. Yeah. And that's land constrained and super dense. But with that density, you get better food, better entertainment, better things to do, right? Better public transit. Yeah. More traffic.
There's just a lot more to do. You just have so much foot traffic. So they have to build infrastructure around that, right?
Right. You get these 15-minute cities, as they try to say it, right? So the idea of a 15-minute city is that everything you need to do in your daily life, work, play, shop, eat, whatever, food, groceries, that's within 15-minute walk. So you never, in theory, have to leave your 15-minute bubble. And that's only possible if we have a dense urban environment, as opposed to somewhere like a smaller town in US or Canada or somewhere, right, where you have to drive everywhere, or suburbs, right?
But what are your thoughts on investing like out of Toronto, like GTA and beyond, or even like a lot of people are investing in places like Calgary?
Right. So I have some friends in Calgary right now that came from Toronto, and they're saying that it's not such a good area to live in and to invest in. It took almost a decade and a half for the prices to start appreciating over there, because the population isn't there. Right now they're experiencing a boom, right? But if the industry doesn't diversify away from oil in just one industry, it's going to be hard for people to go there, because what, affordability? No, they live in a certain place because the jobs are there. People come to Toronto because all the jobs are in Toronto. There's nothing to do in Calgary. Well, I shouldn't say nothing, but there's a lot less jobs out there, right? Yeah. So would I invest in Calgary? Personally, it's cheaper, sure, but I wouldn't do it because I don't know the market, first of all. But aside from that, I just think that there's less quality tenants out there and less to buy out there. Now, if that's the only thing you can buy, and for the foreseeable future, and you don't see yourself, getting the down payment, and you're not getting ahead, investing in Toronto, yes, invest somewhere, right? And I think real estate is a great asset class because you can use leverage, and it's less and less possible now that it's getting more expensive. And I just find that where Toronto investing is going to be, investing in Toronto real estate, is going to be really more of a capital preservation play. It's going to be people that already have capital from BOMAD, the Bank of Mom and Dad, right? Or it's going to be people that have come into mass fortunes all of a sudden, just out of nowhere. Yeah. Or they've climbed the property ladder. So if you invest in Calgary, sure, do that as a stepping stone, in my opinion, to climb the property ladder, if you can do that. Now, I understand when you're just starting out, you only have so much ammo you can use. And I just personally wouldn't use it in Calgary, but that's your individual choice. You could always partner with somebody, for example, to get invested into something. You can invest into like a fund or a REIT, right? To start, putting your money somewhere. At least that's in real estate. And those people running those funds generally will use leverage to be able to, you still get to capture it, just a percentage of it, and you have less control. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So I just think Toronto, the future of it is that it's just going to be rich get richer and the poor get poorer, unfortunately, or just going to get left behind. So the sooner you can jump on that train and start climbing that property ladder, do it. And if it's really too much of a reach for anybody to actually even get started and you're going to start, not be able to pay your bills, then don't do that. It's too risky to do that. Only do it when you feel comfortable enough to get into the market. There's other ways you can invest your money, right? Not in crypto. Please don't do crypto. But
Looks at me.
There's other ways to invest.
Yeah. Okay. So imagine, like, for me being in the perspective of a buyer, and then you being the agent, and I ask you resale versus pre-construction, or even where should Toronto put in their efforts to boosting, just because it kind of just doesn't make sense recently to go to pre-construction, even with the incentives, just because how expensive it is compared to buying resale right now.
There's a long way to go. So your question is new construction versus resale?
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, actually, I don't know if I mentioned that. 18% of newly purchased resale. Did I mention that?
You did. Is it still helping the cause? Like, are we still helping just by buying resale in general? Just that still puts up the supply, right?
No, because resale is like, it's not new. It's not any new supply
Right.
coming when people are actually coming. The net migration is here. Like, there's
Right.
more people coming into the Toronto, into GTA, than there are people leaving. So the only way to solve that is creating more housing, whether it's more density in the existing housing or creating new housing. So
I see.
it doesn't mean you have to participate in the new construction stuff. You're right. It's going to take a long time for the resale market, for the average prices to catch up to where new construction is going to be released at. But there's a lot of benefit in buying new construction, and that mainly is time. If you're buying something today, you have the runway of 5 years to be able to start saving and really, find a partner or whatever, you know what I mean? Don't do it for assignment purposes. But if you were to, buy yourself 5 years, that's your price, and the value of money is going up or down, I should say. That means that price that you bought it at is not that bad in a few years, in 5 years from now. And on top of that, you'll be able to earn more money, you find a partner, whatever, right? So that's the biggest benefit of buying new. For those of you that buy resale, right off the bat, only 18% of people or less are cash flow positive, according to this report. Everybody else is going to be cash flow negative. The far majority is cash flow negative. So you might have a better chance buying new construction to be cash flow positive in 5 years. But again, that's speculative. Who knows?
Yeah.
So yes, you're going to need to, people are going to have to, in general, are going to have to buy new construction in order for there to be new supply to build new construction, to be able to afford to keep the supply up so that the demand, because the demand's not going anywhere, right? We can't change the government immigration policies. And the reason why we can't do that is because we're going to fall behind on GDP. We're going to fall behind on maintaining healthcare, for example, because there's people that are retiring from the workforce that need healthcare. And guess who pays for that healthcare? The current people that are working right now in today's society. They need the young people to work. So because we're having declining birth rates, partially probably because it costs too much to have kids, because the cost of living is so expensive, that we have to bring people into the country.
I see.
Such a housing crisis. It's a housing crisis. Absolutely is an emergency housing crisis.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody has the one answer because there's just too many variables for it.
Yeah.
I think ultimately ask yourself what's best for you and your family, whether it means rooming with somebody, partnering with somebody if you're going to buy real estate. It means asking your parents for help. It means pooling with your siblings or people that you trust that you know going to be in business for a long time with or in relationship for a long time with. That's probably the best way to get invested into the real estate market, if that's what you want to do.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, if there's no other questions.
Nope, that's it.
Thanks for tuning in. For those of you guys listening on this, just go to our website. There's book an appointment if you want to chat. There's a free 15-minute scheduled consultation, and then we can just chat over Zoom and go from there.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Add it up.
Thanks for sticking out to the very end. I hope you got some value out of this. Do me a favor, please press like and subscribe. But more than anything, leave me some feedback so we know what to produce for you going forward. Thanks again.